Hello and welcome back. It is still September 11th, 2016, 15 years after that fateful day. Thank you for staying with the Sunday Review. We're continuing our special edition dedicating that day 15 years ago that changed the world. Now, the attacks on September 11th had an immense impact on the world of politics and the media, and what many will argue, independent press. Initially an almost taboo subject, when the journalists and politicians had to tiptoe around with fear or nearly sacred awe, it quickly became a tool for anyone who wanted to promote a national defense and foreign policy agenda. A tool for policy, a tool for military actions, and a reshaping of reportage. The following report by i24news foreign affairs correspondent Owen Alterman takes a look at how the attacks left the indelible mark on world affairs and mass communication. Let's take a look, then break it down.
It's been 15 years. 15 years ago, America still basked in the glow of winning the Cold War. It had a few short, faraway battles in places like Kosovo, but otherwise, two oceans keeping the country away from the world's problems. And then, everything changed. A decade of wars, deployments, bitter arguments, worries about security, and tensions about the force of radical Islam. First came the war in Afghanistan. Much later, special forces killed Osama bin Laden. But the war goes on. And then Iraq. When the U.S. invaded, it was controversial. Now, not much controversy. Everyone pretty much agrees. It was a mistake, and one that hit America's morale. At home, ongoing security worries and new trends in politics. First, there were neoconservatives who thought America should use its army to build democracy in the Middle East. That didn't work. So Americans sought a new politics and got this. On one hand, saying no to more big wars in the Middle East. On the other hand, saying America should fight hard against terrorists, not act weak, and even bar Muslims from coming into the country. That social tension is one of the legacies of 9/11. These tensions might have pulled at American society in any case, with the force of globalization and shifting demographics. But 9/11 played a part, driving a wedge between the West and Islam, challenging the idea of these cultures living together. And perhaps that was the original objective of the 9/11 attack in the first place.
Joining us in studio is, of course, the one and only i24 News host of Road to the White House and my personal favorite, side anchor, Ami Kaufman. Good morning to you. With us also political analyst Fred Menachem. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Alan.
And very happy to have also defense analyst, veteran journalist, including with the Jerusalem Post, Ali O'Sullivan. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
But Ami, I'm going to start with you. First of all, politically, the world, needless to say, you know, all of us remember where we were that day. I was in a control room, actually, in Midtown Manhattan. First thought that crossed my mind when I saw that tower, the first tower fall, actually, was the world will never be the same again.
Yeah, I was in the media room as well, by the way. I was in Haaretz running the night shift, and I was pretty scared about ending the shift, and it was a tough night.
No, a tough night, and we knew that nothing will ever be the same. How did it affect
Well, you're
politics?
right. I mean, Owen Alterman in his report really touched on most of the issues, but, you know, first of all, those ongoing wars in the Middle East. And in the States itself, immigration, of course, became a big issue, and there were these mass deportation. In the past few years, they've reached 400,000 people a year, even under the Obama administration. Airport travel, of course, has changed around the world and in the States. But in the States, I think big surveillance, massive surveillance was a really big issue, and the Patriot Act was a big issue that I think Republicans and Democrats really fought over for most of the past decade. And in 2015, I think someone could say that the Democrats kind of had a win or a victory in that when parts of the Patriot Act were not renewed. And I think probably a lot of thanks could be given to Edward Snowden.
Just to remind viewers, the Patriot Act, which in essence is something that America never would have considered. I mean, I don't want to talk about the McCarthy age, but wouldn't have considered before 9/11, would it?
Oh, absolutely not. They would have done it anyhow in some senses, really, but it would have been more covert. It would have been, under the radar, but they had no choice. And to be quite frank with you, it was very easy to get past at the time. It kind of, you had the left saying one thing and the right saying one thing, but it was a necessary evil. We had no choice.
And I think, exactly, and I think many policies that were put forth after 9/11, immediately in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, were made able to, I mean, were made so because it was so easy to pass them. It was about us. It was about us against them. That was essentially it.
And that was something that was on the agenda a lot more. That fear fear of terrorism that just didn't really go away. And it was, by the way, we were seeing it a lot more in the media as well. There was a research that was done about 5 years after 9/11 by ADT Research, a research group that found that the number of minutes devoted to coverage of foreign policy was up by 102%. Coverage of armed conflict rose to 69%. That hasn't changed much, especially now because of what's going on with the Arab Spring and with ISIS, things like that. But as you know, all of us know, even though Americans seem to want a little more coverage about foreign events, they are closing bureaus, by the way, all over the world. Less and less journalists from ABC, from CBS, they don't have bureaus in countries anymore. A lot of this, of course, because of what print journalism and journalism is in a horrible state to begin with. But there's this.
It's a great point. It's really opened the door up to these blogs that are out there. Really, blogs and these media outlets that are not conventional media. They're not mainstream media. And frankly, what they've done is they've become surrogates to parties and to candidates, and the lines have been blurred and crossed.
But when it comes to covering foreign news, and I think one thing that we were trying to remember what was going on in the world and what was being covered back in 2001. And many people forget that actually right here in the Middle East, exactly in that specific time, the second Intifada was raging, and it was being heavily covered by foreign media. What was going on at that time?
Exactly. Here, we were in the midst of the second Intifada here, and the media here, I was the military correspondent, we were bear hugged. We were completely taken in by the military establishment, and if you want to have access to information, you had to play the game. And we watched what was happening in America, and we said, oh, this is interesting. What's going to happen with American media now? Is America going to become bear hugged? What's going to happen? We didn't have smartphones and all that stuff, so you need to have that access. And we were watching. That day, the Israeli army had conquered Jenin, and that was the top item on the agenda the day before with Bush. And he was having a collision course with Sharon, and all of a sudden, all those things got pushed aside.
Exactly.
And we're watching, okay, let's go see what's happened in America now. How's America going to cover this?
How's America going to cover this, and what happened to other, as you said, pressing issues? I think, that one can say that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict was actually put aside as a sidebar. But, freedom press is one thing that is on a lot of journalists' minds when it comes to the aftermath of 9/11. And Fred, post 9/11, where you were in the States as well, I remember specifically that the White House, about 3 weeks right after 9/11, in a press briefing, there was a journalist who dared ask in that press briefings, they were daily, shouldn't we as Americans take a look at America's foreign policy in the past, because we're looking at the first Gulf War, America on Saudi soil, as an instigator to what has just happened. Ari Fleischer, who was then the White House spokesperson, said to her, you know what, this is the most unpatriotic question I've ever heard. And the media followed suit. What happened to certain questions unasked in your mind?
It was just such a difficult time in the United States. We had never had anything like this happen on our soil, and so yes, there were folks asking questions. They were being sort of bear hugged, as you would say. The reality is that we became like this. It was like this nationalistic fervor in our country, and journalists were really locked. I mean, their hands were locked. They couldn't ask questions.
Wearing pins by their way on the suits. You had to wear a pin when you were on air.
Right.
Show this patriotism, your allegiance.
Exactly. And so you're right. You didn't go on. I remember clearly. I don't know if you all remember. There was this country music band called the Dixie Chicks.
Right.
And the Dixie Chicks stood up in London, actually, on foreign soil, and they basically said that the people of Texas don't support George Bush or the war that was going on. They almost lost their entire career. They were vilified. They were attacked. They wouldn't play their music on radio. It was a tough time.
It was a tough time, and when it comes to covering wars, and I'm wondering with you, because an entire war, people can argue that the Iraq War is a direct result of 9/11 that was passed through, and I'd like to remind everybody that's a war that was waged on a lie, right? I mean, there were no weapons of mass destruction. We can safely say that right now. When it comes to military reportage, embedding became a fait accompli, didn't it?
It did, actually. You had to, in order to have the access, you had to be embedded. But you know what? There was always, in the beginning, we'll go in with the battalion commander, and we'll be with him.
I want to explain
but you want to try to get away from that.
Embedding, what is the problem with embedding for journalism? Embedding is when you're with the military unit. What kind of information do you get?
Okay, you are, like I said, Doug, Ari I'm going to tell you, this is what we're going to be doing. These are the forces facing us. This is how we're good. This is our goal. And you really get good information. Plus, you have the quotes. You have the access to the soldiers. You can get them right where you want to be.
But
you want to be
just one side of the conflict.
So how do you do that to the other side? And it's difficult. I remember being in the middle of the Intifada, with the Operation Defensive Shield, we'd go into Bethlehem, how do you get the Palestinian side?
Yeah.
And that was always the problem.
And essentially, that was the problem in Iraq, of getting the other side, right?
And I just wanted to chime in here. I mean, frankly, if you look at almost all of our wars and our military coups, especially, and I'm talking about U.S. foreign policy, well, it wasn't based on a lie. I mean, it's all, on some level, I'm just being honest and direct. You know, the American people don't generally always understand the sophistication of foreign policy, and so it's sold to them in our U.S. American way as freedom, and that's not always the case.
No, it's not always the case, so let me ask you that. It's a perfect segue to, you know, people say, if you research media, if you research communications, that one of the biggest misses of the post-9/11 era is what the media did not do after 9/11. The American media did not raise certain questions. Would you say that's right?
I would say that's 100% right, and I think that we saw afterwards, what we saw was the public outcry during, you know, Iraq and Afghanistan, that the media wasn't scrutinizing it enough, and then you saw them go in, you know, in the opposite direction. So 100%. In
the opposite direction. Yeah. And coming and bring it to this day and age, would we say that the American elections, Ami, right now, how is this, you know, when it comes to, we're looking at Hillary Clinton apologizing for supporting the Iraq War, Donald Trump saying he never did, but nobody fact-checking that.
Nobody believes that.
Nobody really fact-checking that. But do we think that the American elections of 2016 are directly affected by that?
Yes. Terrorism in this election is probably the wild card. It's probably the most important issue. There are some polls that show that this is the most important issue this year compared to other elections, even more than economy. There's a Wall Street Journal NBC news poll that's conducted, of course, every election that finds out what is the most important one. And interesting number showing that it's surpassing the economy. In 1996, it was jobs and economy picked by 24%. In 2000, it was economy and ethics, 18%. 2004, which was the first presidential election after 9/11, the economy was still on top, 28%, and terrorism came in at 23%. In 2008, it went back to 27% for economy. 2012, economy was even more dominant by 46%. And now, in 2016, 28% said that national security and terrorism are the most important issue. More than 22% picked job creation and economic growth. So terrorism is what is defining, as we saw, what people really want to see who is going to be the best commander-in-chief, as we just saw in that forum in New York, where Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump kind of went head-to-head against each other. So this is a really important issue. And usually Republicans, by the way, have been seen as more tough on terrorism. But in this election, you see polls that have Hillary Clinton dealing better with terrorism, and you see people that favor Trump.
Phone call. I'm taking us back to the 2008 election, but you wanted to say for it.
No, all I want to say was, you know, Ami has a point, but the reality is you're seeing a lot of polls, and they're still vacillating. At the end of the day, it's the economy, stupid, as they said under Clinton, and that's still the key issue in the United States. It always has been, but terrorism is certainly higher, and you know, at times it's vacillating.
It is, but I slightly disagree. I think with Donald Trump, it's very, very different. I think the issue is about fear. And fear-mongering, and making people scared. Not necessarily about economy, but also about economy, making people very fearful about economy. It's just, you know, that negative kind of...
I just add one thing about covering wars since 15 years. The wars have been up and down in Afghanistan and Iraq here. There's been media fatigue, I think, covering wars. People wanted to say, in the end, just tell us when it's over. Don't give us the details. And that many times we were having this editors calling us, REA, this is like too much. Just, you know, let us know when it's over.
It's the period of ongoing wars. In the U.S., we were never used to that, and that's what happened. It changed everything. Ongoing wars, Afghanistan, Iraq, we never experienced anything like that.
But I'm surprised that now the terrorism is on top of the...
on top of that. And sadly, I think, you know, it's just become part of our daily lives in that respect. Not a matter of if, but a matter of when.
Well, for us, not for you all here in the Middle East.
There's many that goes back to yourself and to what you said, you know, when it happened, sadly, the cynicism of the Israeli press corps, the cynicism of Israelis of, okay, you know, we're used to this type of things. Now the world is seeing the same. I want to thank you all for being with me this morning. Let's go straight back to Denise Wood in Jerusalem, i24 news journalist, apropos memorial services waiting to set up throughout the world, of course, in the States, but here in Israel, what are we expecting, Denise?
That's right, Yael. We are still here at the JNF 9/11 Living Memorial in Jerusalem. In just a few minutes, we're expecting the start of a ceremony commemorating the 15th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks. We're seeing a lot of people arriving in the last few minutes. Some of the police officers from the U.S. who are part of the delegation. Some of them, again, were first responders during the 9/11 terror attacks. We're also seeing several diplomats arriving, as well as U.S. Marines who are warming up for their part in the ceremony as well. We're expecting to hear the U.S. national anthem also. And we're seeing a lot of people streaming in now, getting ready for the ceremony. A few notables have not yet arrived. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Daniel Shapiro, we're still waiting for him, along with Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat. And yes, we're just a few minutes out of the ceremony. Earlier, we also spoke with a spokesperson for Israel's police, who really emphasized the ongoing efforts they have between the two communities.
The two communities, and as we said, memorial services, thank you, Denise, memorial services around the world today, and of course one of the main ones commencing in New York City in a few hours. It's right now the middle of the night there, but as we said, it is September 11th, 2016 today. It's 15 years to that fateful day. i24 News will be taking a closer look at how the world and the Middle East has changed and reshaped in the last decade and a half. So stay with the channel for the rest of the day. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, guys.